Ryan Starrett was birthed and reared in Jackson, Mississippi. After receiving degrees from the University of Dallas, Adams State University, and Spring Hill College, as well as taking a 10-year hiatus in Texas, he has returned home to continue his teaching career. He lives in Madison with his wife Jackie, son Joseph Patrick, and daughter Penelope Rose O. He has co-authored The Hidden History of Jackson, The Hidden History of the Mississippi Sound, The Hidden History of New Orleans, and Dallas Tough with Mississippi State instructor Josh Foreman.
As you can see from this event, there are many mediums in which storytellers operate: music, film, art, dance, and many more. The following talk is an invitation to listen to the stories of the past, the stories of our ancestors. When my friend Josh Foreman and I decided to begin writing stories, we resolved to tell stories rooted in verifiable history, but to never lose track of the story itself. While neither Josh nor I have the talent of a Stephen Ambrose, Winston Groom, or a Shelby Foote, I do believe we have developed a talent accessible to every person: the ability and the willingness to listen, to each other, to those we interview, and to the dead. Before I continue, it is necessary to give you my own worldview, or to use a favorite phrase of one of literature's most fascinating characters, Ignatius J. Riley, my Weltanschauung. It also happens to be the worldview of most Southerners and human beings in general. The dead are not dead. Every person ever conceived still lives, in hell, in heaven, or still here on earth. If you accept that particular philosophy, then I'd like to share with you 3 advantages to listening and getting to know those who live, but no longer on earth. 1. Listen to them. Get to know them. One way or another, you'll be spending all eternity with them. Learning their histories, their stories. On this side of eternity, listening to the past is a way to familiarize yourself with your future neighbors. 2. Listen to them. Learn from them. History is a wonderful and beautiful discipline that can help answer life's 3 greatest questions. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? 3. Listen to them. Be entertained. The ex-residents of Earth are just like us, coal-encrusted diamonds with all the concomitant shortcomings, failures, heroics, dreams, disappointments, endurance, and humor that is particular to the human race. Just as we want to be heard, just as we crave to be listened to, so did they. Think of every Facebook, Twitter, Instagram story we hope, we silently beg others to see and like and read. We want to be heard. So did they. I invite you to listen to the stories that surround us here in Mississippi, the ghost of Mississippi. Get to know them, learn from them, be entertained by them. In the course of searching for stories, Josh and I have gotten to know many fascinating persons. Among them, Clara Solomon, a young teenage Jewish girl coming of age in 1860s New Orleans. Fortunately for us, she left an extensive 400-page diary of her experiences. It is a moving and intimate portrait of a young woman living in tumultuous times. We've gotten to know Roy Nosaka, an American of Japanese descent who enlisted to serve his country during World War II. His reward? He and his fellow Japanese Americans were part of a military experiment to train an army of war dogs on Ship Island, Mississippi. They were literally thrown to the dogs day after day until the experiment was mercifully terminated. Nosaka left behind an oral interview in which his wit, his optimism, his sense of patriotism shine forth. If by some clerical error I'm admitted into heaven, Mr. Nosaka will be one of the first persons I introduce myself to. In the course of our research, Josh and I learned invaluable lessons from a great number of our predecessors. We have become pupils of some wise teachers. Among them is Dr. Gilbert Mason, who helped to ignite the civil rights movement in Mississippi when he organized a wade-in in Biloxi immediately following the assassination of his good friend, Medgar Evers. Dr. Mason is an exemplar of perseverance, courage, and civic service. We've learned from the indomitable and feisty Sisters of Mercy, who came to Mississippi on the eve of her darkest days, 1860. For the past century and a half, they have served the people of this state as nurses and teachers, fitting the children for earth without unfitting them for heaven. They teach us the virtues of sacrifice, service, and love of neighbor. Needless to say, Josh and I have been entertained by the deceased. Tennessee Williams helped me through the COVID year. Many evenings I poured a glass of gin and opened the treasure that is his plays. The man shines through his work. He exemplified the idea that art imitates life. He lived what he wrote. Read his plays and you get to know him. Another entertainer in the next world is André Penaco, a French carpenter of the early 18th century. Penaco was the Forrest Gump of the 1700s Mississippi. He was everywhere and met everyone. Fortunately for posterity, he left behind a log of his travels. Like the ancient Odysseus, I'm sure Penaco is still roaming around enthusiastically exploring the hills, valleys, and rivers of heaven. Machiavelli, while in exile from his beloved Florence, wrote, "When evening comes, I return to my home, and I go into my study, and on the threshold I take off my everyday clothes, which are covered in mud and mire, and I put on regal and curial robes, and I enter into the ancient courts of ancient men, and am welcomed by them kindly. And there I am not ashamed to speak to them, to ask them the reasons for their actions, and they, in their humanity, answer me." Although I have not yet invested in a regal and curial robe, I have, like Machiavelli, come home from work, sat back, and listened to those who walked this earth before me. There are many, many stories out there, many persons waiting to be heard. I invite you to spend some time in the cypress swamp on mile marker 122 of the Natchez Trace and listen to the Spaniards under Hernando de Soto, who 500 years ago trekked through the dangerous beauty of our state. Visit Grand Village in Natchez and listen to the natives as they danced between their ceremonial mounds, unaware that they would soon be driven from their home forever. Go up the road to Mount Locust and appreciate the ingenuity and gumption of its builder. And then walk down a small, narrow path until you come to an eerie and mystical clearing where a number of unnamed slaves lie in unmarked graves. Listen to them. Go up into the Delta, the place James Cobb called the most southern place on earth, and listen to the stories of the everlasting tripartite battle, the battle between man and nature, between the oppressors and those yearning for freedom and equality, and between the have and the have-nots. Drive down to the Gulf Coast, where one of Mississippi's great poets, the son of a sailor, went searching for songs. Listen to the stories of the Vietnamese who fled unspeakable horrors in their homeland, only to come to the land of the free and have to fight for acceptance and a living. Needless to say, they've succeeded. Sail out to the barrier islands and listen to the pirates, the artists, and those seeking an escape. There are countless more stories waiting to be uncovered, countless voices waiting to be heard. All you need do is listen. And yet, one of the tragedies of our age is that we've forgotten this vital skill. Leah Chase of Dookie Chase Restaurant tells us, if you just listen, you got to listen to everybody, and you can learn from everybody if you just listen. I think that's a problem today. People don't listen. They don't listen. If they just listen, they can understand what it's all about. It is ironic that in the midst of combating sexism, racism, ageism, we have shunned the past. We have belittled, pushed aside, and ignored the most populous segment of the human family, those who have gone before us. We have abandoned the pursuit to the answer of one of life's great questions: where did I come from? The disciplines of history have been removed from curriculums and its requirements are minimized. This is the fate of the arts in general. Science and math and English grammar, not literature, have emerged triumphant. But not here, not in Mississippi. While we recognize the value of the above-mentioned disciplines, we still value our history. We honor our dead. We keep alive our stories. From our license plate, history, heritage, hospitality, to the construction of 2 new beautiful museums of history and civil rights, to the tens of thousands of households who still gather together on Sunday afternoons for food flavored with our state's 2 most delectable ingredients, fellowship and stories, we remember our past. Hopefully, we listen. Understanding history, Listening to the persons of the past is one of the keys to building a more just, true, good, and beautiful society today. In Mississippi, we have the conflict. We do not have all the answers, but I do believe we're willing to listen.